Now, I'm not saying that all the people who claim to be fortune tellers have power, but there are some people that do have powers. There have been many, many instances of people who've had large followings, and those powers have been recorded. Now, I know that some of the people out there will say, but they all have been challenged by certain people at certain times. So let me explain to you the reason why those challenges are not valid. As mentioned, much of the powers that come from impurity come from misplaced emotional or sexual energies. Those misplaced energies come when the person has a certain energy activity within himself. It's not something that you can turn on, such as the commandment to love the Lord your God. The Alter Rebbe asks, Rabbi Shneur Zalman asks, how can you give a commandment to love? Love is a feeling. How can you force a feeling? And the answer he gives is, you can't force the feeling, but you can obligate the meditation, the thoughts that will trigger the feeling. But the feeling itself is dependent upon the preparation of the individual, and the individual may or may not get the feeling. The same thing is true with ESP or other divinations or other arousals of powers that people might have. These are highly dependent upon the emotional aspects of the person. Challenging the person with a bribe is not a way in which you can get it triggered. It's something that requires some kind of emotional activity. Most of the time, it's triggered by relationships with another person. And you have to like the person to have engaged some kind of spiritual interaction with that person. Person who challenges you, you have no liking for the person. You would not have an emotional triggering. And so this is bunk. This is not a real test of the person. The test of the person is when the person says something, does the thing come true or not? Now, I've said that I know several people who have powers. I identified several of them on the internet. Shar Margolis is one of them. And she was labeled a charlatan by one of the respondents. I know Shar Margolis' sister. I don't know her personally. I've heard of her reputation. The police department in Oakland County actually used to consult with her regarding certain cases that were difficult. I don't know if she resolved the cases, but the police did not call me and certainly did not call the people on the internet. So obviously she must have something, some kind of knowledge that we don't have. Her sister, Dr. Alicia Tilsdale, whom I've met personally, avers that Shar has intervened in saving the life of her husband on numerous occasions out of the blue, calling her that something has to be done for her husband. And this is something that this Shar Margolis has had ever since she was a child. I know a Rebecca Rosen, who I never dealt with her directly, but students of mine who attended lectures of mine regarding reincarnation told me of her and told me about her astounding ability to be able to recognize people surrounding the people who are coming for a reading, and she was able to identify their relatives, who they are. In fact, even was able to identify the names of that relative the way they were called in Yiddish that nobody else would possibly know. So the things that I was told about her are things that are impossible for a fraud to be able to catch. Is she 100% for real? When you're doing things for money and you become popular, it's very hard to remain real. I've had personal interaction with Linda Freud, who is a medical intuitive out on the West Coast, and you can Google her. In my meeting with her on the telephone, she was able to read my personality as if she was reading a recipe. Now, whether everything she says is 100% correct it's impossible for me to know, because these are things that are dealing with the source of the soul. However, a person as honorable, as respected as Rabbi Moshe Schatz, who's a well-known translator of Kabbalistic works in Yerushalayim, avers that Linda Freud, that she's 100% accurate in whatever she says. There's no other way of describing this accuracy except that there is a spiritual power that this person has. In this case, it's probably a good power, and it's not coming from a negative place. However, there are people who have powers that are for negative places. When I was in Boston, Dr. Bernard Schechter, who's not a delusionary person, who today is a very successful dentist who has created certain devices to prevent TMJ, told me that in his living room, Michio Kushi, who was the head of the macrobiotics movement in the world, showed him how he can levitate. Now, this was remarkable. How can a man levitate in midair? Did he or didn't he? I don't know, but there were people there, and Dr. Schechter was insistent that he did so. When I met his colleague, Meir Abasera, who is well known in the Chabad community about Michio Kushi, he was not impressed. He says, so he jumps in the air, so big deal. In other words, Meir wasn't saying that he couldn't do it. Meir was saying, so big deal.